University, and we have two guest speakers, Professor Srinivas Pati and Professor Langmurji. And I welcome each and every one of you. I hope this program will be of great helps for making ourselves acquainted with the importance of celebrating these 75 years of India's independence. And our today's program is Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. And I'll not take much time. And first of all, I'd like to call upon our chief guest to deliver a speech.
Thank you, Chairman Sir, Professor Lalin Twanga, my dear colleagues who are the distinguished speakers for this webinar, Professor Srinivas Pati, Professor Lalin Silo, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a very important day in the history of India because the whole country is celebrating this Azadi Ki Mahotsav, Amrit Mahotsav. This program, this Mahotsav, this big celebration has been launched way back on the 12th of March this year to celebrate the 75th year of independence that's going to happen next year. The whole idea is, this is because of this, rather the whole idea is mooted out by our Honorable Prime Minister who launched this Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav. Amrit means, there are two things to Amrit. One is Amrit means the elixir of life, elixir of energy. And Azadi Ki elixir means the elixir of independence. The Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji has thought very seriously about to set out for ourselves certain objectives so that at every point of our history, we have to not only celebrate, but also be conscious of the work that lies ahead. When you celebrate the contribution of each and every movement of history. Freedom March was flagged from Sabarmati Ashram. I said the 12th of March 2021, that was the day, actually way back in 1930, our father of nations, Mahatma Gandhi, launched the civil disobedience movement, the salt satyagraha. Because as all of you are aware of the fact that salt is the necessity of life. Salt is the energy of life. Without salt, one cannot live. It's not a question of salt means the NaCl, sodium chloride. Salt means many things to many people. At least the Indic civilization has got a different connotation for salt. Salt was symbolic for Mahatma Gandhi. And as you know, during the freedom movement, there are numerous kinds of symbols were adopted to rally around the masses. And Mahatma Gandhi was one of the biggest innovators who invented at different points of time, at different points of the freedom movement, different symbols. And symbols are important not only to achieve certain objectives and goals, but also to realize one's individual worth also. What kind of symbols we are as a nation. So this is not only a symbolic, but remember this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav is not a symbolic thing. It is an effort to rally around the entire country about the need to understand our history, at the same time thinking for our future. It is an important milestone. I've already said that at the age of 75, a nation that's in the year 2022, August 15th, will be 75. So just 75 weeks before that, Prime Minister Modi launched this Azadi Ki Amrit. And this will continue up to 15th of 2023. So 2022, 15th August, will complete 75 years of independence. And from then on, another year, we will have to celebrate. Celebration is not only fun and games, but celebration means taking stock of the situation, taking stock of the history, taking stock of the future course of action that we need to undertake for the development and the achievement of our national integration project. Because we engaged in the nation building since 1975 by integrating so many princely states and also provinces into one union. And the process of nation building is going on. Even today, we have got many issues within the country regarding apportionment of the borders. I'm referring to the latest issue with regard to Mizoram and Assam. We have not yet resolved, we have not yet decided about many things, many issues, many problems that are lying ahead, that are already there and lying ahead of us. And for that purpose, a sense of history is required. When we talk about sense of history, we have to remember the contribution of our leaders, whether Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel, or Bal Gangadhar Tilak, or any other leader who, of course, Mahatma Gandhi stands unique. There are many other leaders also of high stature. We have to understand their contribution. We have to understand about their sacrifices, because our generation and our future younger generation, that is our students' generation, that is the second generation, they need to know the hard work and the contribution that our forefathers have made for the freedom of India from the British yoke. Indian society was, under subjugation for 1,000 years. Indian civilization was not, but it was definitely constantly being threatened every now and then. But it has survived the test of the time. That is the strength. That is the strength on the basis of which now we are able to go ahead, move ahead, and develop our country. Now we have set for ourselves to have a $5 trillion economy. It is not a matter of joke. Just 2 decades back, we were not even $20 billion economy. Now we are dreaming of, and we are set for ourselves to have a $5 trillion economy. How could we do it? Because of the contribution of our forefathers. We have to remember not only our leaders who did contribute for our freedom, but also in the post-independent India, there are numerous builders, nation builders, who did their bit to develop the economy, the society, the polity. I deliberately tell about these things because, Indian society, Indian political system is one of the most study political system now in the contemporary world. We have got freedom, we have got democracy, here we have got the rights, we have got everything. And still we have got many things to do. Mainly, we have to counter the issue of poverty, unemployment, inequity. These are the things that we need to now ponder. We need to focus on, and we need to chart out for ourselves. I do not want to go on talking because there are designated speakers, distinguished speakers who will be talking about some of the important issues or aspects of our freedom movement. But I would like to just touch upon the contribution of the tribals to the freedom movement. Here I want to mention one name with respect to Mizoram, Pasaltha Khungchera. Excuse me if I have worded it wrongly, who took the British on the hills of Mizoram to the task. Such kind of bold Pasalthas who took the mighty British and fought for their freedom. I am referring to Mizoram, but in various states there are many tribals. I'm talking about my tribe, my state, where the tribals were also very much in confrontation with the British and were very much assertive about their freedoms and rights. Because Indian civilization is rooted in freedom, the concept of freedom. Indian civilization is rooted in the concept of equity. But now we are facing the issue of inequity, poverty, and deprivation. And on this occasion, we have to think about these issues. And this 75 years of India's independence next year will definitely put a kind of mark and also help us to reassess ourselves. So we have to take care of the contribution of our forefathers, take care of the history books. We do not read any history about this Pasaltha in Mizo history. Mizo boys would not remember, boys or girls, students would not know much. I don't know how much. Same is the case with people in Odisha. Same is the case with Andhra, Tamil Nadu. We know the history of Lingito. We know of Lord Karjan. We don't know about Pasaltha. It is our honest task to rewrite history, to bring into light the biggest contributions that they made to make our Indian civilization one of the strongest civilizations in this world. I stop here. I thank both the coordinators and secretaries, that is my dean and my colleague, Professor Robin, both of them, for inviting me as a chief guest to speak on this occasion. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Professor J.K. Patnaik, Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, for your brief but insightful speech with regards to our celebration of 75 years of independence, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Thank you very much. Now, may I call upon our first panel speaker, Professor Srinivas Pathi, who will deliver a talk on legacy and relevance of Quit India movement. Okay, Professor Pathi, please take your time.
Thank you, Professor Lalin Truanga, Honorable Dean, School of Social Sciences, Mizoram University, and Chairman of this meeting. Professor K.R. Sambasiva Rao Garu, our Honorable Vice Chancellor. Professor J.K. Patnaik, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University and today's Chief Guest, Professor Lalu Niyara Sailo, my co-panelist, Professor K. Robin, my colleague and one of the organizers, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege for me to speak a few words on Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebration. And within these celebrations, today's day is celebration of Quit India Movement Day. All of us know in the history of India, Quit India Movement, August Revolution, August Kranti is the watershed mark. The entire country, the freedom struggle, the courses, the ideas, the activities, everything changed drastically, dramatically because of this one day, that is Quit India Movement. I thank our Honorable Chief Guest, Professor J.K. Patnaik, because he has dealt with entire gamut of background information, which is actually beneficial for all of us. And I straight come to the topic, Quit India. As already discussed, so much of activities, movements, Swadeshi, non-cooperation, salt satyagraha, and a host of other activities culminated in that day, which is 8th August 1942 in the then Bombay, present Mumbai. One day before, today's date, 8th August 1942. The place called this Gwala Maidan, now renamed as August Kranti Maidan in Mumbai, is the place where Mahatma Gandhi, the tallest leader of India's freedom struggle, the apostle of peace for the entire world, for the humanity, gave a clarion call, do or die. And he expressed the feeling in that speech, I wish today, by this night, India must get freedom, but destiny would have it the other way. Mahatma Gandhi and all the top leaders of the freedom struggle were arrested by the colonial British government the same night, the darkest night in India's history. And next day morning started Quit India Movement, or this movement in the world history. This is a typical movement unparalleled, without proper designated leaders. Mahatma Gandhi and all top leaders are in jail, thousands and thousands. And it came to the young leaders and common people. The whole world witnessed a very significant movement by common people. I narrate a small anecdote. Mahatma Gandhi distributed small sheets of papers to young men and women in the place, meeting place, in the dais he was giving in his left side, and his secretary sitting there was distributing. One such sheet came to a person called Surendranath Dwivedi, S.N. Dwivedi in short. He went on to become leader of his party in Lok Sabha, in Rajya Sabha, and he became governor of one of the states in Northeast, Arunachal Pradesh. S.N. Dwivedi was a young man, young boy, and he got a cheat from Mahatma Gandhi, go underground and work for the people. I had the good fortune of looking at that small piece of paper which he had photo framed in his drawing room. I met him and he told, that is the greatest certificate I got because I quit studies due to Quit India Movement and went underground. And like Dwivedi, hundreds of young men and women, they became the leaders, many of them unknown, unsung heroes of India's freedom struggle. And rest is history. Mahatma Gandhi's speech on that day was very significant. He told, dear countrymen, I tell you to do or die, which means either you work for attainment of independence, freedom of the country, or in the process, sacrifice your life. In short, do or die. Many of the people who criticize Mahatma Gandhi for such a clarion call, they actually forget the exact meaning of do or die. Gandhiji told, freedom is for the brave, not for the faint-hearted. Young men and women of this country must have a life which is free, which is beyond anybody's comprehension. The mighty British must know that immense potentialities are within our young men and women, and that particular call given by Mahatma Gandhi charged entire Indian nation. When we talk about quit India, we know it has gone through several phases. For example, in the first phase, so many people of this country, they wanted to go out and wanted to stage strikes, dharnas, satyagrahas, schools, colleges, offices were closed down. Many of the professionals, teachers, students, they left their job and their profession activities and became satyagrahis, freedom fighters. And this country witnessed a very big activity because the negotiations with the British government failed. And why? Because the so-called Cripps mission, which came to India to discuss India's struggle of freedom, to give Indians freedom or at least self-rule, failed miserably. Most of the Indians, the leaders, they expressed their views other than what Cripps was talking about, and they rejected. This is one. Second, without the consent of the Indians, Indian leaders per se, the British government unilaterally declared that India joins the forces in World War II, 1939 onwards till 1945. This is mid Second World War period. And people didn't want to join. Many of the people told at least Indians should have been consulted beforehand. That was not to be. Then the people, they were demanding more and more to have the idea that we cannot tolerate the British atrocities, economic exploitation, social exclusion. So these are the ideas that all kinds of groups, teachers, students, women, farmers, workers, lawyers, they all joined this Quit India movement. And friends, also, there were groups which are known as the so-called extremists or the fundamentalists or the hardliners. They also didn't want to wait any further for India's independence. And they told that, yes, let us all join together, and Indian society as a whole became restless because they didn't want that this British colonial rule should continue anymore. And at the top of it, as Sir Patnaik was telling, economic exploitation was at its worst height, that Indian economy was simply under the subjugation of British exploitation. So they told that no more than this activity. And remember, during this We Quit India movement, there are very few major demands of the Indians, minus their top leaders, most of whom were in prison, imprisoned by the colonial masters. Number one, the British must quit India instantly, immediately, and hand over the reign of India to Indians. And then India's joining of Second World War should be scrapped without our consent. And remember, many of the soldiers were taken from India, undivided India in that time, and they were compulsorily admitted to this World War. And Indians did not like it, did not appreciate it. And another, big demand was an interim government of Indian people should be established and they will rule themselves. They did not be guided by the British masters and their laws and regulations. Indians should be free to set up their own government and to control their own affairs. In the first phase of Quit India, something happened. That is the revolution in the urban centers. Because today we talk about information revolution, and that day it was very, very difficult. People were carrying. I have talked to Mr. Dwivedi, who told they were traveling by foot to towns, villages. They were working in the railway platforms as vendors and distributing handwritten pamphlets. So in the urban centers, the Quit India movement gained momentum in the first phase. Then picketing, boycott of government offices in front of the liquor shops, in front of the services provided by the government. All sorts of picketing strikes, they started in urban centers. Slowly, the workers in the factories, they stopped working and they told their masters that no more we want to work for the British authorities. So many of the urban centers, industrial centers became paralyzed. Then after this time, second phase started. It came to the rural areas, India's heartland, where the farmers, bulk of the common people lived that time and today. And in the second phase, the farmers, the farming workers, common people in lakh and lakh of Indian villages, they joined the movement. And during that time, they tried to damage the little bit of communication line, railway line, or even this telephone line, that they didn't want that the British police, British spy, British officials should communicate. Their own communication is word of the mouth. Handwritten pamphlets they can do, but the British people should not be able to communicate among themselves, and they told that let us break these communication lines of the British. Government offices, government vehicles were attacked. And remember, that time, Mahatma Gandhi, who did not support any of such activities, was inside the jail, and there is no proper guidance to the common people on the streets. A typical case of common people taking the reins of a vast movement into their own hand, and came the third phase. This is the most crucial and most significant and some of the most interesting aspects of Quit India movement is the third phase. Friends, in different parts of India, people established their own people's governments, and some of them were called nationalist governments. I will narrate a small anecdote of one such nationalist government. In the state of Odisha, there is a place called Irwin in Bhadrak district. Common people established their own government. They appointed a prime minister. They appointed ministers, and they were deciding for themselves even for a few days, but they were managing one nationalist people's government. And in many places of India, like Balia, the birthplace of late Prime Minister Chandrasekhar, and many, many places, people had their own nationalist governments. And this is the normal story. The real story is yet to come. Friends, let me tell you, the atrocities of the British government became unthinkable. We can't imagine today what happened after such establishment of nationalist governments in many parts of India. Rough estimate, conservative estimate, official records say as many as 942 innocent people were killed, butchered by the police. the military forces. They say 153 civilians were injured. Thousands were imprisoned. Many of them were sent to Kalapani, Andaman Nicobar Port Blair, the jail which is notoriously known as the place where somebody goes and cannot come back. One is destined to die in the cells of the Port Blair jail, black jail. But the point is, that time, conservative estimate says so many people were killed, injured. I refer to Iram in Bhadrak in Odisha. There, the people were having a meeting of their ministry, their cabinet, surrounded by men and women and children, just like April 13, 1919, Jallianwala Bagh massacre by John Dyer, Major Dyer. Similarly, the British police came and from all sides, they gherowed the common people in Iran and they simply started killing the common people. On September 28, 1942, 29 innocent people were killed and 56 were injured by government record. But when we go to that place, they say the number cannot be counted because it was full of blood, full of bloods. The place is now known as Rakta Tirtha in Odia language, which means the pilgrimage with bloodshed. Because this is one example. But friends, throughout India, you go and talk to people, you will find such saga of sacrifices and atrocities, brutalities of the British government, the colonial masters. Today, in free India, when we are going to celebrate 75 years of independence, Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav, even we cannot dream, those of us who are born after India's independence, such things can happen in any civilized society where innocent civilians are killed and butchered. That is the legacy of August 9 or August Revolution, August Kranti, quit India. Friends, then this thing continued, and due to the ill health of many of the leaders, some of them, including Mahatma Gandhi, they had to be released after a few years in jail. But already the damage is done to the British Empire, and the igniting of minds of common men and women in India already happened, and the legacy of Quit India continued till we attained independence on 15th of August 1947. Then the idea is what happened actually. During Quit India, when the leaders were not there, the common people, we have to take the legacy to that level. Communication, personal linkages, word of the mouth, spreading of messages by handwritten pamphlets, village level, ward level, small community level meetings, their own decision making, a typical direct democracy type activity started during the Quit India movement, which is unparalleled in the history of the world. That is Quit India movement. And some of the young leaders who were there, at least as underground leaders of Quit India movement, like Ram Manohar Lohia, Jai Prakash Narayan, Hare Krishna Mahotsav, Biju Patnaik, Aruna Asaf Ali, Surendra Dwivedi, and not to forget Sucheta Kripalani. These people, they became the stalwarts of India after independence in politics, in society, and in their own merit and right. So those people who sacrificed, let me tell you another story. This Dwivedi, Surendra Dwivedi's life is put into one book, Surendra Dwivedi, Life and Work. We released it in New Delhi with Mr. K.R. Narayanan, India's then Vice President, who became later the President of India. While introducing the leader, Mr. K. Narayan told the audience, friends, you may not be knowing him, this person. He never went to any university, but he is one of the best students of the universe because he has studied people, studied society, and more importantly, has seen and worked with Mahatma Gandhi. So somebody who worked with Mahatma Gandhi became a great person after independence. Imagine the impact of the person and the movement. Friends, when one lady, I can't forget, Usha Mehta, she established single-handedly underground radio station, unthinkable. Today, after we remember this movement, we say we need community radio stations where people manage. That time, Miss Usha Mehta, a young lady, established independently, single-handedly a radio station which clandestinely provided messages to the people and to the young men and women who were there to lead the common people through underground movements. And remember, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, we cannot forget him. He sneaked out of India in this time and established INA, Indian National Army, Azad Hind Fauj. He was in the other side of the World War. But again, this same idea that the British must leave India. And he came through the eastern side of India and his movement failed. But this failure is a great success because it ignited the minds of young men and women of this country that India requires freedom, instant freedom, no more of colonial rule in this country. Then, friends, what is the British reaction? The mighty British who take pride in telling that the sun never sets on the British Empire, they became jittery. They were shaken and they could not know how to react. And some of the papers we found in the archives, they say that many of the British top leadership, they said, it is time us to pack bag and baggage. To leave this country, India is becoming unmanageable. And you know the story of Otley versus Churchill. So people thought that if Churchill becomes the leader, then he can manage well, the Iron Man. But what happened? Nobody could stop. India eventually attained independence, but the igniting of mind started with the Quit India movement. And friends, remember, killing of common people, innocent civilians, imposition of heavy monetary fines on the people. Even some of the government officials, police officials who quit their job for Quit India movement, they were imprisoned. And this became like wildfire, and those who were not connected to freedom struggle, remotely linked to the freedom struggle of India, they also became interested to know for how many days the British should continue and sooner they should leave this country. The wartime losses changed the political equations worldwide. You must know that 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, devastation of even some of the victors, London, the city of London, and many more such activities changed the international and national political administrative equations. And the British could think, yes, it is the time to leave India. Please remember Gandhiji's words that let every Indian consider himself or herself as a free man, woman from this day. 1942 to 1947, 5 years, off and on, things continued. The movement continued, but Quit India made us aware that how soon the British should leave. Friends, I was told by Professor Rabin to talk about this particular issue, that the legacy and the relevance today. Remember, the spirit of Quit India continues. We must know that this country needs the spirit of Quit India. During 75 years of independence, celebration of Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav, so many things need to quit India. What are they? Communalism, quit India. Casteism, quit India. Filth, quit India. Corruption, quit India. Illiteracy, quit India. Unemployment, quit India. Poverty, quit India. Backwardness, quit India. Our pettiness, quit India. Let us all think about such issues. We should think about harmony, communal harmony, a society free of caste bias. We should think of a society which is swachh, which is clean, a society which is corruption free, a society which is literate and educated, a society where people, they are educated, skilled, they are employed or self-employed, a society where we may not have riches, but we should have freedom from abject poverty, and we should have regional balance. We should have balanced development. Friends, Quit India, the legacy, the relevance continues, and I'm reminded of the celebrated American poet Robert Frost. All of you know the famous lines, the woods are lovely, deep, and lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep before I sleep. Swami Vivekananda told, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is achieved. And we know Mahatma Gandhi's words that we want political freedom, but which is partial only. We want economic, social, and cultural freedom. I'm reminded of one statement by Gandhiji that let us all open our doors and windows. Let the winds of culture from all places reach us, but our feet should be strong in the ground so that we are not swayed away by those winds of culture and change, because without compromising our Indianness, we should be global, we should be international, we should be a person of the world. But this is the time when we think, rededicate ourselves for the cause of our motherland and for the entire world. Oh my God, how can I forget another quit? Not quit India. COVID-19, quit India and quit world. Friends, this particular pandemic has changed the equation, not only in India, but also in the entire global community. Negatively speaking, by default, the whole world has become one, but for this pandemic, COVID-19, that should quit this world, this universe. And friends, with these few words, I think that if we dedicate ourselves, we think about our country, what I can give to my country, not receive from my country, then for us, the sky is not the limit. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Srinivas Pati, for your insightful and what a fascinating presentation speech. Now I'd like to request the second guest speaker, Professor Gurgina, who speak on Indian nationalism, rise and growth. Professor Mangura, please take your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Irwin Tuanga. the chairman of this webinar and the dean, School of Social Sciences, and firstly, I would like to acknowledge our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor KRS Sambasivarao, and the chief guest of this webinar, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor J.K. Patnaik, and Professor Robin, who is also one of the coordinator of this webinar, and my fellow guest speaker, Professor Srinivas Pati. It is a privilege and an honor to be invited here to deliver a topic on Indian nationalism on this occasion of the celebration of 75th anniversary of India's independence, Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav. Now, I have divided my talk in two parts. The first part deals with the rise of nationalism, and the second part deals with the growth of the national movement. So when we look back 75 years, or even before, much beyond that, what we have seen is that in the second half of the 19th century, India had witnessed the full flowering of a national political consciousness and the growth of an organized political national movement. Okay, and this political consciousness has to arise first in order to fully nurture the young nationalism that has developed in India. So without a full political consciousness, the nation could not embark itself on the grand national movement. Now, to have such kind of national political consciousness, there are certain very crucial factors which are important for the nurturing of the nascent or the infant nationalism. So let me narrate some of these factors. One of the first thing is the consequence of foreign domination. Now, basically, modern Indian nationalism arose as a challenge to foreign domination, and the very conditions of British rule in India helped the growth of national sentiment among the Indian people. The British rule, whether directly or indirectly, have certain consequences which had provided the material, the moral, as well as the intellectual conditions for the development of a national movement in India. So it is very crucial to understand that the foreign domination, the British domination of India, or the British rule itself, has provided enough reactions for Indians to develop moral and intellectual conditions. Now, the second aspect of this factors for the rise of nationalism in India is administrative and economic unification of the country. Now, the nationalist sentiments grew easily among the people because India was unified and welded into a nation during the 19th and 20th century. Now, the British had gradually introduced uniform and modern system of government throughout the country. And so India was brought under one homogeneous monolithic administration, and administratively India was unified. Now, apart from this, the destruction of the rural and local self-sufficient economy and the introduction of modern trade and industries on an all-India scale had increasingly made Indians' economic life a single whole. And this destruction of local industries and the replacement of this by the introduction of modern trade and industry had also facilitated the interlinking of the economic life of the people who are living in different parts of the country. So India was brought under one single administration, and that also was brought under one single market, now unifying the country administratively and economically. And the third point is that Western thought and education also had very crucial impact on the growth of nationalism in India, particularly during the 19th century, when large number of Indians were educated in Western education. They imbibed modern, rational, secular, democratic, and nationalist political outlook. And these educated Indians began to study and admire and emulate the contemporary nationalist movements in Europe. And so they studied thoroughly the works of people like Rousseau, Thomas Paine, John Stuart Mill, and other Western thinkers. And at the same time, they also look at the achievements of people like Joseph Garibaldi, Mazzini, as well as the Irish nationalists. So by this time, India was well acquainted with the developments elsewhere in other parts of the world. And so many Indian scholars and educated people began to understand what was happening in other parts of the world, what kind of national movement was taking place, and who were the players. And thirdly, fourthly, we have the role of the press and literature. Now, the instrument through which nationalist-minded Indians spread the message of patriotism and modern economic, social, and political ideas came largely through the press, and a large number of nationalist newspapers made their appearance during the second half of the 19th century. And these newspapers, in their columns, they carried on articles which criticizes official policies, and they also present Indians' point of view, and people were asked to unite and work for national welfare, and they disseminated through the press the idea of self-government, democracy, industrialization, etc. And so to the masses, this press were playing a very crucial role. And the press also enabled nationalist workers living in different parts of the country to exchange views among each other. And another crucial factor for the growth of, or for the rise of Indian nationalism was the rediscovery of India's past. By the turn of the mid-19th century, many Indians had already fallen very low, that they had lost confidence, self-confidence in their own capacity for self-governance. This was because their colonial masters continuously reminded them about the inferiority of the Indian culture and the Indian philosophy. So when you are fed with such kind of negative orientations about your own society for a sustained period of time, you start losing faith in yourself. And so many of the nationalist leaders try to arouse the self-confidence and self-respect of the people by countering this propaganda by the colonial masters. And they point to the cultural heritage of India with pride and refer the critics to the political achievements of great Indian rulers like Asoka, Chandragupta, Vikramaditya, Akbar, so on and so forth. And in this task of rediscovering India's past, the nationalists were also helped and encouraged by the works of European and other Indian scholars, particularly in the field of heritage, in art, architecture, literature, philosophy, science, as well as politics. So we have the contribution of people like William Jones, who founded the Asiatic Society of Bengal in this aspect. And so there was a renewed sense of pride among Indians when they rediscover their glorious past. And another important aspects which may have played a crucial role in the rise of Indian nationalism was racial superiority or racial arrogance of the colonial rulers. Okay, though this may not be, this may be a secondary factor in the growth of national movement. Anyway, the tone of racial superiority adopted by many Englishmen was evident in their dealings with the Indians. And one very important aspect where Indians face racial discriminations and racial slur from their colonial rulers was particularly when it comes to justice. Okay, justice usually failed whenever an Englishman was involved in a dispute with an Indian. So an Englishman cannot be actually convicted in an Indian court when he is involved with another Indians. And so these are some of the important factors which have created the condition or the ground for the rise of Indian nationalism. And in the meantime, there are also growing consciousness, political consciousness among Indians, and Indians from different parts of the country aspire to have one single political platform for the entire nations through which they can propagate and they can also promote the idea of political self-determination or political independence from the colonial rule. Now, as a result of this, various efforts were made, and many Indians had been planning to form, as I've said, an all-Indian organization of nationalist political workers. However, the task of this fell either intentionally or unintentionally to a well-intentioned English Indian civil service retiree, A.O. Hume. Now, the aim of the Indian National Congress were declared to be the promotion of friendly relations between nationalist political workers from different parts of the country, development and consolidation of the feeling of national unity, irrespective of caste, religion, or province. Because we have to remember that India is a nation of diversity, linguistic, religious, and cultural diversity is the essence of India. And therefore, in the midst of this diversity, it was very important for these early nationalist leaders to create unity. And at the same time, the early Indian National Congress leaders also felt that they need to formulate popular demands and their presentation before the government. And most important of all, what they felt very important was the training and the organization of public opinion in the country. So with the founding of the Indian National Congress in 1885, the struggle for India's freedom from foreign rule was launched in a small but organized manner. Now, as we all know, the early years of the Indian National Congress was characterized by political moderation, mendicancy, and the desire to refrain from mass-based politics, because the Indian National Congress leaders in those early days felt that the masses were not yet ready for the kind of sustained political movement. Now, the second part of my speech is about the growth of Indian nationalism. As I've said, till the foundation of the Indian National Congress, Indian national movement was carried on in a low-key manner, and Indian National Congress leaders were not entirely in favor of mass-based movement. So that is exactly why Bal Gangadhar Tilak would say that the 3 days gathering of the Indian National Congress was a 3 days tamasa, where friends would meet together and discuss about politics, aside from politics, their professions. Now, in the years after 1919, we see the national movement spreading to new areas, incorporating new social groups, and developing new modes of struggle. So how do we understand these developments, and what implications did they have? Now, first of all, the First World War created a new economic and political situation in India. And this led to a huge increase in defense expenditure, which was financed through war loans and increasing taxes. Like custom duties were raised and income tax were introduced. And throughout the war years, that is from 1914 to 1919, till the end of the First World War, prices were increasing exponentially, which led to extreme hardship for the common people. And on top of this, to add the problem to the people, villages were called upon to supply soldiers, and the forced recruitment in rural areas caused widespread anger. For example, here in Northeast India, from 1917 to 1919, there was the so-called Anglo-Kuki War, because the Kuki refused to comply with the forced recruitment carried out by the British. And then in 1918, 1919, and 1920, 1921, crops failed in many parts of India, which resulted in acute shortage of food. And this acute shortage or famine situation was accompanied by an influenza epidemic. And according to the census of 1921, as many as 12 to 13 million people died as a result of famines and the pandemics, okay? So at this stage in the Indian national movement, a new leader appeared who suggested a new mode of struggle. And this new leader is Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi had returned to India in 1915, where before that he had already perfected the art of non-violence Satyagraha in South Africa. So after arriving in India, Gandhi successfully organized Satyagraha movements in various places. For example, Champaran in Bihar and Kheda in Gujarat in 1917, and also in Ahmedabad among the for the cotton mill workers in 1918. So emboldened with this success that Gandhi had gained in his Satyagraha campaigns in Champaran and other places, he decided to launch a nationwide Satyagraha against the proposed draconian law known as the Roland Act of 1919. This act was opposed vehemently by Indians, but despite the opposition, it was pushed through in the Imperial Legislative Council, and it gave the act gave enormous powers to the government to repress political activities, and it allowed the detention of political activists and prisoners without trial for 2 years. So Mahatma Gandhi launched a non-violent civil disobedience movement against the Rowlatt Act, which is known as the Rowlatt Satyagraha, which was quite successfully responded by the people. Now, while the Rowlatt Satyagraha was a widespread movement, no doubt, it was still limited mostly to cities and towns. It did not touch upon the hinterlands or the rural areas. So Gandhi felt the need to launch a more broad-based movement in India. But he was also certain at the same time that such kind of movement could not be conducted or launched without the cooperation or without bringing together both the Hindus and the Muslims on the same table together. So one way of doing this, Gandhi felt, was to take up the Khilafat issue. And I think the Khilafat issue is something which we are all aware of. I may not need to recapitulate here. So at the Calcutta session of the Congress in September 1920, Gandhi convinced the other Congress leaders the need to start a non-cooperation movement in support of the Khilafat and also for Swaraj, independence. Now, this non-cooperation movement was responded both from the urban centers as well as from the rural areas. For example, in the urban centers, in the cities and towns, the middle class responded successfully. Thousands of students left their schools and colleges, which were run by the government. Headmasters and teachers resigned from their post. Lawyers gave up their jobs. The council election were also boycotted in most provinces except in Madras. Okay, and the effect of the non-cooperation movement on the economic front was also quite dramatic. Like, for example, foreign goods were boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, and foreign clothes were burned in huge bonfires. And during the height of this non-cooperation movement, the import of foreign clothes have declined by half between 1921 to 1922. And in many places, traders refused to trade in foreign goods or finance foreign trades. So when the boycott movement spread and people began discarding foreign clothing. They start wearing only Indian products, khadi products, and that encouraged the emergence in great numbers of the Indian textile mills and handloom. And so, in a way, the non-cooperation movement had created avenues for indigenous industries to gain foothold once again in the Indian market, which was once destroyed by the British industrial policy. Now, even in the countryside or in the rural areas, the movement spread and it drew in its fold the struggles of the peasants and the tribals. And the peasant movements demanded the reduction of revenue, abolition of beggar, and social boycott of oppressive landlords as well. So in many places, they boycotted the oppressive landlords by denying them services by people like barbers, washers, denied their services to these oppressive landlords. However, in February 1922, the non-cooperation movement was called off by Mahatma Gandhi because he felt that the movement was turning violent in many places, and satyagrahis, according to Gandhi, needed to be properly trained before they would be ready for mass struggles. So that was what Gandhi had reason or place as the reason for cancellation of the non-cooperation movement. Now, Mahatma Gandhi continued to contemplate on a nationwide agitation. And so in 1930, he launched the Salt Satyagraha and the civil disobedience movement subsequently. And Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the country or the nation, because salt was something which was consumed by the rich and the poor, and it was one of the most essential items of food. And the tax on salt by the government monopoly, the tax which was levied by the government on salt and the government monopoly over the sale of salt, according to Gandhi, revealed the most oppressive face of the British rule. So when Gandhi gave his demand to the British authority, and when it was not conceded on the 12th March 1930, the Salt Satyagraha began. And here in this civil disobedience movement, inaugurated through the Salt Satyagraha, thousands in different parts of the country broke the salt law, and they manufactured salt and demonstrated their manufacturing in front of government salt factories. And when the movement spread across different parts of the country, foreign clothes was boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, peasants refused to pay revenue. So this was a no revenue tax campaign, also simultaneously happening. And in many villages, the village official resigned, and in the tribal populated areas, many forest people violated the law for going into the forest to collect firewood, and they graze their animals like cattle. So there was widespread civil disobedience. Now, Worried by the increasing participation of the public, the government began arresting the leaders of the Congress one by one, which led to a number of violent clashes in different locations. So in view of this, Gandhi once again called off the civil disobedience movement, and he agreed to enter a pact with Irwin on 5th March 1931. And this is known as the Gandhian-Irwin Pact, which, according to which Gandhi consented to attend the Roundtable Conference, which was earlier declined or refused by the Indian National Congress. But when Gandhi returned from the first Roundtable Conference, he was disappointed because the government had begun a new cycle of repression, and the Congress had been declared illegal, and a series of measures had been taken to impose the prevention of public meetings, demonstrations, and boycotts. So Gandhi decided to launch once again the civil disobedience movement, but for a year, the movement continued. But by 1934, it lost its momentum and petered out. Now, in all these movements, what we have seen is that there was increasing number of mass participations. Young and old started participating, and they openly and defiantly oppose and refuse to cooperate the British government and its functionaries. Now, my fellow speaker, Professor Pathi, has already delved in detail about the Quit India movement. So I am not going to deal anymore about that in detail. But what I wanted to point out regarding the Quit India movement was these pertinent questions. That is, why had it become necessary to launch a movement in a very, very difficult time when the possibility of brutal repression was a certainty? Because Gandhi and other Congress leaders were well aware that if they do it, there will be brutal repression from the British government. But they also felt that it was necessary to do it. It was imperative on their part to do it. So one very important reason why they did that, in spite of those grave dangers to their own life and the life of other people, was the failure of the Cripps mission in 1942 had made it very clear that Britain was unwilling to offer an honorable settlement to the Indians and a real constitutional advancement to the Indians during the war years. So this has made Gandhi and other Indian leaders very, very disappointed. And actually, India had joined the war effort against actually the opposition of many people. And despite that support, the British government was unwilling to make concessions. So apart from this, there were also popular willingness to give expression to this discontent, because the manner of British evacuation in Malaya and Burma was also quite vivid in the memory of the people. The British just left the Indian subjects to their own fate when they evacuated from Burma and Malaya. So many Indian citizens who were there were just left to fend for themselves. So this was very crucial. And as we have narrated along, the Indian national movement, which began with the founding of the Indian National Congress in 1885 have come a long way. And now, looking back, the Quit India movement, the great significance of this historic movement was that it placed the demand for independence on the immediate agenda of the national movement. Okay, after Quit India, there could not be any more retreat. There could be no retreat, and any future negotiations with the British government could only be on the matter of the transfer of power. So the Quit India movement in that sense was also very, very significant and very crucial, and independence was no longer a matter of bargain. And especially after the end of the war in 1945, this was very, very clear. Now, when we celebrate the 75th anniversary of India's independence, we must recollect the sacrifices, the great sacrifices made by the founders of these nations, the millions of people who have selflessly sacrificed themselves. And I earnestly request every one of us who are here in this webinar to once again rededicate ourselves for this country, for these nations. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Langul, for your profound and insightful speech on the legacy and relevance of Quit India movement. Now, our two panel speakers have already completed their present speeches, and they could cover their speeches beautifully within 1 hour. Means we have given them 30-30, but they beautifully covered their speeches within 1 hour. Thank you very much for that. And now we are going to be on the second of our program. And before inviting Professor K. Robin to propose vote of thanks, I would like to bring to the notice of all the audience that there is going to be the third lecture series, third series, on 2nd October 2021. Let me repeat, there will be another lecture program on 2nd October 2021. And now I'll call upon Professor K. Robin to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. At the outset, I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor for his kind and overwhelming support today, attending the webinar. And my sincere thanks and gratitude goes to our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor and our Chief Guest, Professor J.K. Patnaik, who had given a very, very insightful and thought-provoking speech touching upon the crux of the program, Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav. And of course, our respected guest speakers, Professor Srinivas Pati and Professor Lalmurlian Silo, wonderfully presented, beginning their presentation with a theoretical turn, followed by a empirical discourse, and very much insightful and in educating us with national movement, freedom struggle, and its connected and related discourse and themes. Very wonderfully situated. I really thank both the speakers tonight for educating us yet again, and also sensitizing the entire audience the importance of the national movement and how it still is relevant in contemporary period. Needless to say, and most important of all, I would like to thank all the participants tonight. It is because of your participation that this program could be successful. Without your participation, this program would be meaningless. It would be, futile exercise. The organizing committee undoubtedly, sincerely, dole out our thanks to all of you. And please feel free to type or send us via email should you require participation certificate. Definitely, whoever want a participation certificate, please send us via our email. My email, let us not bother the dean. I'll take care of that. My email, which is written in the flyer. Whoever wants the certificate, we will definitely send you. And as our respected chairman has stated, we are going to have again a third lecture series on 2nd October. So we hope that all of you joined the program again. So tonight, dear participants, panelists, respected chief guests, guest speakers, participants, my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, wonderful to have you. Indeed, it's a wonderful program, successful program. Thank you so much. Sir, please unmute.
From the chair, I would like to say thank you to all of you, our chief guests and guest speakers and all other participants. And we must not forget to say thank you to Suraj, who has been taking all the measures for the successful completion of this program. Thank you.
Thank
all of you.
sir.
Thank you to all of
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Naveen and Professor Alin Truanga for your